Good afternoon. Greetings to our first quarterly market webinar. Hard to believe that already 1 month of the new year has passed. So happy to see all of you. This is our summary for the fourth quarter of 2024. And we have, as in the past, set up a program with different members for you. I will just quickly introduce what you can expect. So after a few intro slides from me, my colleague Antonio will give an overview about the markets in the EU27. That will be followed by policy updates from our Deputy CEO and Policy Director, Dries Ake. And then we have external contributors. We're happy to have with us Saif Islam, who is a senior consultant with EUPD Research Energy. He will talk about their view on the European PV and storage market. And then we have 2 presentations from our members. So first we have Mariana Janeva, who's the vice chair of the Bulgarian Association for Production, Storage and Trading of Electricity. And we have with us Nold Jäger, head of policy and public affairs at Holland Solar. That will be followed by a Q&A where all of us presenters will be happy to receive comments, questions from you. And then I think the 90 minutes should be already over. So let's see. I just wanted to share with you first a disclaimer that this is, as usual, a members only webinar. So please don't share the slides. Nevertheless, of course, you are welcome to tweet or share any comments on social media. Introduction, you see, so I just wanted to kind of summarize briefly our European market outlook takeaways, which we introduced or launched mid-December. And as you can see here in the picture, the photo or the picture we showed was not as bright as in the past. I think this is basically a summary of all results. You could simply here once again see how bright the market was over the previous 3 years, growing between 41 and 53%. Obviously, energy crisis driven, and that last year's market grew only by 4%. Still, meaning another record year with 65.5 gigawatt installed. Nevertheless, so I think we just calculated that this 4%, if you compare it to the growth of the previous years, meant a 92% decrease. But that's probably just for statistics. When we talked about the 4% to some journalists, they said 4% doesn't sound too bad when you compare it to other sectors. Nevertheless, I think I also wanted to point again at this slide, if you haven't seen it before, because I find it pretty interesting, because it really shows now a widening gulf of solar investment growth on the one hand, and changes in annual installed PV capacity. And what you can simply see here is that it really turned negative for the first time, simply because growth was so slow compared to decreases in prices that continued dramatically also in 2024. I think this is also one important slide, and this is at least still somewhat positive, because although we decreased also our outlook for the next few years by 8% from 890 gigawatt, which we forecasted by 2030 in our global market outlook published at last year's Intersolar. So we're now down at 816 gigawatt. The good news here is that this is still above the 750 gigawatt Repower EU target, and it's also above the combined NECP targets of the member states. But this has to be also looked at with a little bit of caution, because it's the first time that in our low scenario that we would miss these targets, both the NECP and the EU target. A somewhat brighter approach was, which I wanted to share also once again recently by Amber, which came out with the European Electricity Review 2025, and they look here only at generation and not at installation. And I think the good news is here that last year solar for the first time produced more power than coal, and you could see also that both coal and gas declined. And I think this is also a nice picture showing clearly how much electricity solar is already contributing, and the countries that you see here on the top are somewhat different than in the top 10 in terms of installations. And you can see that Hungary is on the top here with a 25% share, solar share of electricity generation in 2024, followed by Greece with 22, and Spain, that's also the second largest market in last year, with 21%. I think that's a somewhat different narrative Amber is showing. I think it's good to see what solar has reached, but also to kind of raise the finger and show that we need to do more to continue on that path. That leaves me also to the outlook in terms of installations or what we can expect. We did a brief poll with some manufacturers and developers, so it's not, you shouldn't consider that representative. So the sample is less than 10, but you can see that actually when asked how they look at business at the business in Q4 compared to Q3, so it was. Everyone said, or almost everyone said, it was lower, and 2024 to 2023, it was also more negative. For 2025, that's interesting is that the companies that we talk to expect a similar amount of installations compared. So that means Antonio will show you what we expect. So we expect more growth actually than last year, but that's what we hear from the industry. We also asked a few other questions on inventory, because that's also important for the business. And when we asked them how it was for Q4, so most of them said that it was decreasing or slightly decreasing. Some said that it didn't change. These were only manufacturers who we asked here. And if you looked at the and when asked how their inventory is in Europe at the moment, they rather said that it's at normal level, but the majority said that it's at higher levels. So asked about the price developments they are expecting for 2025. It was interesting to see that they even expect slightly decreasing to further decreasing prices, while I don't know, some also considered stable prices. But yeah, interesting is that nobody expects increasing prices, something we saw recently, as Antonio will show later. Okay, so that brings me to a slide from Rystad Energy on inventories. Also, here you can see how inventories have changed over the last few years, and basically the import volumes have, which of course also relate to inventories, that the import volumes have hardly changed. Installations obviously went up, but imports are still above 90 gigawatts or in 2024, which leaves quite a gap compared to installations. Hardly anyone has been able, or people are still trying to explain how that works. But that would mean, on the other hand, actually, that the industry points to around 30 to 40 gigawatts of module stock. If you talk to companies, you still don't get to that numbers, so there's a slight disconnect. Fact is, nevertheless, there is still inventories, which will keep prices probably low for the coming month. That brings me to Antonio to give an update on the different markets. So after we published the EMO, Antonio talked to several stakeholders in the sector in the first month of the year and is now sharing his results. Antonio.
Thank you, Michael, and greetings, everybody. It's a pleasure today to be here. My name is Antonio. I work at the Market Intelligence Department of Solar Power Europe, and I have the pleasure today to walk you through the latest EU27 market updates of 2024, with a particular focus on the last quarter of last year. So, as Michael already touched on, in 2024, the solar growth dynamic continued in the European Union, but at a slower pace. So we recorded a 4% growth rate in installations, reaching 65.5 in 2024. And for next year, as Michael mentioned, and despite the feedback that we received from the companies, we're forecasting the market for this year to grow at around 7% and reach 70 gigawatts of installed capacity. And we're expecting these slow growth rates to continue up until 2028. And the main takeaway is that we're no longer expecting annual installations to reach the 100 gigawatt mark by 2030, and we would stay below 92 gigawatts according to our medium scenario. What we normally do in the quarterly webinar is we measure the gap between what we expected and what the national sources are providing in terms of the installation figures. And on the table, you can see exactly the difference between the estimations in the EMO, in the European Market Outlook that was published in December, and the updated results over the course of January. So first, going to Germany, we estimated around 16 gigawatts of solar PV capacity deployed. And at this moment, the latest results show that we are at 16.5 gigawatts. And there is still room, there is still potential to reach 17 gigawatts installed in 2024 if you account for the delay in registrations in the Federal Network Agency platform. So that's why we are keeping the very sunny weather forecast for Germany, because it greatly exceeded our expectations. Now going to the ground-mounted segment in Spain, all this data is coming from Red Eléctrica, the TSO, and we had to put a cloud in front of the sun because finally we're seeing installation levels that are lower than what we estimated, because especially for the last half of 2024, I'll show you more details later on, there was a notable decrease in installations in the ground-mounted segment, and therefore we have 1.4 gigawatts less added at this point because we were expecting 7.6 gigawatts. So somewhat underwhelming second half for the Spanish ground-mounted segment. Going into the two very shiny markets from 2024, Italy and France. First, Italy, we were expecting around 6.4 gigawatts installed last year. The latest data from Terna indicates that we are at 6 gigawatts, but upward revisions can be expected. And then for France, greatly exceeded our expectations for last year. We were forecasting around 4.7 gigawatts, but at this moment, we have 900 megawatts more deployed in France, and I'll show you more details later on. Poland pretty much aligned with our expectations, around 4 gigawatts deployed. Last year, the market has really contracted after 3 years of spectacular growth, and that's why we're including a cloud in front of the sun in here as well. And then lastly, the Netherlands closing the top 6 markets in the EU, around 3 gigawatts installed last year, according and in line with our expectations, but we included the stormy conditions for the Dutch market because installations are really coming down for the past 2 years. And Nold from Holland Solar will give you more details about the Dutch market later on. So now going into the country-specific highlights. First, the undisputed leader of EU solar markets. Despite the drop in the residential market and also the commercial and industrial relative to last year, we still see that as I mentioned, the Genmar market grew by around 8% to 10%. And this is mainly due to the expansion in large-scale solar, especially in the last quarter of 2024. As you can see, the country registered the highest installation level in the history of Germany, almost 2.4 gigawatts. And this is not accounting for the delay in registrations, and normally this underestimates the market growth around by 20% in terms of deployment. So that's one of the reasons why we think that installations may climb to 17 gigawatts for 2024. Then, as I mentioned, the residential market continued its contraction in 2024. As you can see, all the quarters were below the average quarter in 2023. And then commercial and industrial proved stable and somewhat resilient, but still experienced a decline, especially in the last 3 quarters of the year. But nowadays, you cannot really talk about the German PV market without also going into balcony PV, which was a very niche trend, but nowadays the segment is growing really fast. And all this data is coming from a report that will be published over the coming months. And last year, very surprisingly, 2 in 5 solar PV systems that were registered in Germany were plug-in systems of 1 to 4 modules, which is very significant. But then if you put that into the annually installed PV capacity, that represents around 2% because, of course, these systems have low capacity. Then this growth last year takes the cumulative installations to more than 800,000 by the end of last year, which amounts to 700 megawatts installed in the balcony PV segment. And again, many of these systems are not registered yet, and some estimates point to more than 1 million systems already in place, already connected to the grid in Germany. So, as I mentioned, we are now at 7% growth rate for the German PV market. And as I mentioned as well, it's probable that we will reach the 17 gigawatt mark once all the installations have been registered. And as you can see in the graph, the last quarter was very strong in Germany with 4.4 gigawatts installed. Now, traveling to Spain, the ground-mounted segment essentially experienced a very notable decrease after July. The installation level peaked at 1.3 gigawatt DC of installed capacity, but since then has experienced around a 36% decrease if you compare this period to the same period in 2023. Also, you can observe that in December, we have conspicuously low data, and we may expect revisions over the coming weeks. So that takes the Spanish ground-mounted segment below our expectations, and it's likely that installations will remain below 6.5 gigawatts of installed capacity in the utility scale segment. Now going to another Mediterranean country, the third biggest in Europe, Italy registered a very strong growth. And in here you can see the breakdown between the 4 quarters, comparing 2024 with 2023, and especially worthy highlighting the first quarter of last year, which was 50%, nearly 50% above the same quarter in 2023. Why? Well, in here you can see the breakdown of installations, and there is a clear shift towards larger installations that compensate for the decline in the residential segment, similar to what has happened in Germany. And essentially the residential market slowdown that was expected. Also, we think that it's gonna persist. It's gonna linger for long because of saturation of the segment and the phase down of incentives. And then the commercial and industrial somewhat underperformed because the Transition 5.0, which was a new program introduced last year, it was an update, it was an adjustment to the previous one, Transition 4.0, has achieved limited effectiveness. And there are calls in the industry to go back to the previous program because it was incentivizing to a larger extent the installation of rooftop systems from businesses in Italy. And lastly, the utility scale segment growing really fast at a 150% growth rate compared to 2023. And it's essentially showing no signs of deceleration for 2025. So expectations vastly surpassed in 2024 in Italy, and we're gonna stay way above 6 gigawatts of annual market in Italy. Now going to the other very shiny market in the European Union, the French PV market shines bright in 2024. The country has registered nearly a 30% increase in installations, reaching 5.6 gigawatts. And as you can see as well, the last quarter was particularly strong, 1.6 gigawatts, and all the quarters stayed above 1.3 gigawatts installed. Again, if we go into the segmentation, all the segments, as you can see in the graph, have witnessed growth, very significant growth, especially the small scale PV segments. So the residential and C&I are driving up yearly expansion, mainly thanks to the export tariffs, the S21 scheme, and industrial and utility scale have somewhat slowed down due to lengthy permitting and land constraints. So our expectations of a market, an annual market that's larger than 4.5 gigawatts have been greatly surpassed. And this is, this is great news. We're very happy when this happens. Then the last market that I'll cover is the Polish PV market, which has, as I mentioned, registered a decline after coming from 3 years of spectacular growth. Micro installations that's below 51 kilowatt remain below 2023 levels, as growth really depends on new funding programs. C&I has plateaued in 2024, and utility will land below 2 gigawatts due to low installations, especially in the first quarter of 2024, as grid connections remain the main bottleneck. So at the current pace, the market will stay around 4 gigawatts of installations. And overall, the decline is around 16% from 2023, and it will land around 4 gigawatts, as I mentioned. Now, this is our traditional section that essentially covers a collection of the most important news of the last quarter of 2024. And it's focused on the top 5 markets plus Belgium. And I'll go very quickly through them. So in Germany, the innovation tender achieved 3 times over subscription rate, awarding close to 600 megawatts of solar and storage capacity. Then in November, SMA implemented cost-cutting measures to be accompanied by a reduction of up to 1,100 jobs. Then the Federal Network Agency slightly decreased ceiling prices for all tenders in 2025. BayWa will cut around 1,300 full-time jobs by the end of 2027. Then if we go to Spain, the government set a new target for 2030, that was in October, of 76 gigawatts, and the PERTE fund allocated funding for 3.6 gigawatt hours of battery storage. Then in November, the fourth innovation fund from the European Union selected Trina's 1.5 gigawatt solar module factory project in Spain. In December, finally, the consultation started for the capacity market, which should be operational by mid-2025. And Stellantis and CATL go ahead with 50 gigawatt hour LFP battery production plant in Zaragoza, in my hometown, in the northeast of Spain. Then going to Italy in October, some regional governments limited the usable ground space for solar, which brought huge uncertainty to the sector. Then we had the results from the latest renewables auction. That's a tech-neutral scheme with 332 megawatts awarded to solar. Then the Innovation Fund also granted funding to Futurasan to build a PV module gigafactory in Italy. In December, the government announced further increases in the tax credit for European solar modules under the umbrella of the program Transizione 5.0. And 1.5 gigawatts were allocated in the agri-PV tender. Then we go to Poland. In October, the EU approved 1.2 billion euro state aid to support clean tech local manufacturing, and also cleared regional support scheme for 5.4 gigawatt hours of battery storage. So really busy month. And in November, solar got awarded most of the capacity in the renewable auction. So that's close to 1.5 gigawatts, which is very positive news for the industry. Then in December, the capacity market auction results were disclosed, and 2.5 gigawatts were allocated to battery storage, and the timeline for delivery is 2029. Then also Roltec is building a 50 megawatt solar module production factory in Poland. Then going to France, the feed-in tariffs for rooftop PV below 500 kilowatt were further reduced compared to the previous 3 months. There are new provisions for making solar mandatory on parking areas, and this is a segment that is attracting a lot of investments, that is growing really fast. And then also we had the results in the ground-mounted PV tender, where nearly 950 megawatts were awarded. Lastly, we also had results coming from the other ground-mounted PV auction, but I think this one is neutral, and ground-mounted projects of PV got close to 470 megawatts. And the CNI rooftop PV segment also got 253 megawatts in the last tender. Lastly, Belgium, Fluvius, plans to install more than 400,000 smart meters in solar-powered homes by 2025. Then in November, we had the news from the capacity auctions that will catalyze 1.1 gigawatts of battery storage, which is very huge for the country. Then the VECA, the governmental agency, estimates that 270 megawatts of commercial rooftop systems are to be installed under the PV mandate before the end of 2025. And Flanders may have reached the 1 million PV systems mark by the end of 2024. Then moving on to the solar module prices tracker. This is also a section that we always like to cover to keep everybody updated on the latest dynamics on prices. We had the low-cost and mainstream PV modules, as Michael already touched on, experience the first price hike after 2 years of continued decline. It seems that the control production cuts in China have played a significant role in this increase of prices, but this paradigm of low prices is expected to linger as EU stock levels are still high. distributors need cash, mainly because of, they need cash, and essentially that drives price competition, which will maybe further push prices down, and demand is expected to stay flat in 2025. However, the pressure mounts to move prices upward as the industry faces harsh consolidation. But it's important to mention that it remains to be seen how quickly and to what extent that happens in 2025. Sorry. Then the last part of my presentation will cover our research on auctions and PPAs. And talking about auctions, we had a record year for EU auctions and tenders in 2024. 18.4 gigawatts were awarded last year. Those are preliminary results. And Germany awarded a third of the total volume. However, the list of countries with successful auction schemes is increasing, which enables the diversification of these volumes that are awarded in Europe. And obviously that's reducing the weight of the German tenders in the final result. On the right, you can see a pie chart containing the different types of auction schemes that we had last year. Hybrid and co-located schemes emerged in 2024 to deliver 4.5 gigawatts. And that's the second largest category, which truly signals the enormous investment appetite for this formula. And yeah, we really hope that this trend continues in the future. And lastly, tech-specific auctions for PV continue to dominate with close to 2/3 of the capacity that was awarded last year. And then lastly, solar corporate PPAs is still booming. So we had another record year with 7 gigawatts signed in 2024. That takes the cumulative contracted capacity to 20 gigawatts at the end of last year. And this is mainly due to very attractive prices in the contracts for corporates in PPAs. And more corporate buyers are combining solar with wind for their energy procurement strategy. And as you can see on the right, almost 2 gigawatts of multi-technology deals were signed this year in Europe. That's it on my end. Thank you very much for your attention. Now passing the football to Dries, which that will cover the latest policy updates in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. And I like it that you're passing me the football. I think we're going to do that on Friday in reality, no? Yeah, that's the plan. Very good. So welcome, everybody. I'm happy to give you some of the latest policy updates on the European level. So first of all, what you will certainly know is that we changed leadership here in Brussels on the European level. So the new European Commission has started on the 1st of December. And that start also comes with quite a different political narrative here on the European level, which is much more driven by the conversations around the competitiveness of Europe, security, of course, as well as climate change and staying the course on the Green Deal. So in that sense, it's a wider portfolio of narratives that we also as an industry need to relate to, that we need to use as a selling the importance of the solar sector. And that is something that we, of course, saw coming. We anticipated this shift in the agenda. So already last year, we did a great study called Mission Solar. I'm sure you've heard about it. But in anticipation of this agenda shift, which gives you very good numbers on topics like competitiveness and security, and of course also on climate change. And you can see some of the top results there. If we keep pushing and accelerating solar in combination with more flexibility, especially grids and batteries, and electrification, that's the best strategy to structurally reduce wholesale electricity prices and improve Europe's competitiveness. Already by 2030, it's minus 25%. Yeah? This is substantial, even in the short term, with an acceleration on renewables, electrification, and flexibility. And that trend continues to 2040. We see a similar positive story in terms of economics and security when you go to the middle part of the slide. So the investments in the electricity sector to accelerate renewables, storage, flexibility are pay off big time with savings on operational expenditure, mainly through reductions of fossil fuel imports. So you basically get system cost benefits, so that works good for the economics and for electricity bills, but you get almost for free some really good geopolitical security dividends there as well, because you reduce your structural dependency on fossil fuel imports. So that's an important number as well. And the third one, of course, relates to the essence of what we're doing here in terms of combating climate change. And you can see that, of course, those emissions go down even faster than in a current policy scenario in 2030 and 2040. So I'm repeating that because it's a lot. That report is really then a bit of a bottom line data evidence pillar for policy work in the last weeks, especially because we are in a shaping moment. We're shaping the European Commission's agenda, and that is starting to take a little bit more shape. We're actually celebrating. We were happy to actually have the first publication of the new commission last week called the Competitiveness Compass. So you can clearly see what words will be with us for the next years, and there's of course good reasons for that. So the compass of the European Commission will be around competitiveness, simple as that. What does it mean? It was a relatively short communication, like 15, 20 pages. It sets out the framing for the next 5 years, and it talks about 4 chapters. The first one being closing the innovation gap in Europe, focus on AI, artificial intelligence, but also very much around getting from startup to scale up, and the valley of death, as I call it, that Europe has so much problems with, how to overcome that. That's a focus. Second, important for us is, of course, that roadmap for decarbonization and competitiveness alike. So that's the framing. Green Deal business case. That's how we stay the course. And there the narrative is very good in that sense that the Commission also puts it black on white that our structural issue with high and volatile energy prices is due to our dependency on fossil fuel imports. And the solution is to reduce that and replace that with clean energy and electrification. So that's quote unquote what is in the competitiveness compass. So that's sets us off on the right problem definition and solution definition. That's positive. Also, energy taxation, grid tariffs are all in the picture. And we will soon expect more details in the form of a clean industrial deal and an action plan on affordable energy. And then later in the mandates, a specific action plan on electrification and a package of law on grids. So in that sense, some of what we've been asking for is reflected in the competitiveness compass. Another important point for the Commission's agenda in the next years, the European agenda in the next years, and also for us, for solar, is to make sure that we are reducing excessive dependencies also from a clean tech point of view, security in general, resilience, those are the key words. So there is going to be a lot more attention around European manufacturing of heavy industry, clean tech. So that's very positive for us because that certainly is important and a job to be done on solar. It's important to also create demands for products where there's probably not yet that much demand for, like EU products or green products, so having lead markets for those products. We're expecting especially public procurements and leveraging public procurements to play an important role in that part, and to further pay attention to diversify imports and materials. And there's also a link to the need to modernize the World Trade Organization, and that's something that we are also onto, because of course the World Trade Organization is important in terms of keeping a global collaboration and economy, but making sure that resilience and smart industrial policy is allowed, so that you take care of that gray zone. Sometimes the debate is quite black and white. Either you go for open borders or you go for protectionism. That's not the solution. The solution lies in resilience, and that's why we need to talk to the WTO. There's also some horizontal enablers that supports the competitiveness push across, like Simplification, there's a lot of attention to that for the moment. Simplification of administrative burden. The European Commission came up with a wonderful word. They're very creative in finding these terms. They call it an omnibus regulation. And that is basically meaning that all of the new legislation around corporate social responsible reporting and due diligence is now being reviewed and seen to what extent it can be aligned, simplified, made it easier for companies to cut the red tape. There's a risk, of course, that this simplification exercise, which we support as such, leads to a deregulation exercise, which we don't support, and that will be a question going forward. But it's certainly a strong point of attention for the Commission. It's considers it as one of the first early wins for competitiveness to simplify reporting. Fair enough. Second point is single market integration, very important. There was a consultation on that already as of one of the first actions of the Commission. We've responded to that, obviously, because of course the single market for electricity, for energy is not there yet. We need much more cross-border grids. We need much better network codes for demand response, for other things. So that single market is key, and is also key for the competitiveness of the European Union because we leverage scale. It's as simple as that. Finance, the multi-annual financial framework, that's the EU budget. It needs to be reset as of 2027. We have a new one. No, as of 2028, I should say. And of course, there's a lot of different priorities. There's a lot of different needs. Think defense, think migration, think security in general. In addition, energy transition, and you get to quite an interesting conversation that we're anticipating on the EU budget, the MFF, as we call it. Skills as well, Union of Skills, very important for us. And then further coordination and financing by having a specific competitiveness fund that then really leverages private funds, de-risks investments for the strategic priorities of the European Union. So that's the shaping of the European Commission agenda. We can break that down in a couple of dates. I'm going to kind of leave that with you, but maybe some highlights is that at the end of this month, the 26th of February, that is the end of the official first 100 days, which is very popular in politics. And at that date, we are expecting the publication of the Clean Industrial Deal, as well as the action plan on affordable energy, as well as this omnibus package on simplification. After that, there's some other publications. For example, noteworthy that the proposal for the next EU budget is already coming in July 2025. So that's very soon. 2026 electrification action plan, the grids package, public procurement review. So that's when the actual pieces of legislation are going to come. Before that, it's more about seeing where things can be optimized. And maybe to close for the moment is that, none of this, is, of course, came as a surprise to us, to Solar Power Europe. And we have been very busy, I shall say, in making sure that our inputs into this emerging agenda was taken into account. We are about to publish also a new paper that brings all of these things together and is Solar Power Europe's input in strengthening European competitiveness. We've been already feeding a lot of that in, of course, bilaterally and in conversations under the radar. But we're also kind of putting it together into a document and publishing this in the course of next week. And that is really making our points around the importance of regulatory stability. Staying the course on the Green Deal means primarily to implement what we agreed after 5 wonderful years of regulatory upgrades and very successful results on renewables, on electricity markets, on buildings. So implement the electricity market design, make sure PPAs fly further for European competitiveness, industrial off-takers. Make sure you land the energy taxation directive finally so that countries can move forward with shifting energy taxation away from electricity, very important. Make sure that when you intervene on energy bills in the short term to avoid further competitiveness issues, that you do it carefully and that you do it on the non-energy items, that you don't intervene with electricity price formation in the electricity markets. Yeah, you can intervene on the levies side or on the taxation side or on the network charges, but not in the wholesale electricity price formation. And so that's very important. And such a direct aid should then also be conditional and time bound. Yeah? So if there's state aid for industries because they are struggling, which is very important to deal with, support them with taxpayers' money, but on the condition that they electrify and renewables-based electrification. And so these kind of things, that seems to be like how you do this best. Yeah. More grids and flexibility, harmonize grid tariff calculation methodologies, allow flexible connection agreements, which we now have in the electricity market design, to become a permanent feature, not just temporary, but a permanent feature, and make sure you continue to have a very strong policy roadmap for flexibility. Yeah. Strengthen the business case for rooftop and agri-PV. We have a buildings directive, or the energy performance of buildings directive, which has been really good for us because it has very clear provisions on rooftop solar and mandates for public buildings and commercial and industrial and even residential over time. Implementing that as swiftly as possible will create a new dynamic in the rooftop market, which we believe is very important. And then also agri-PV, there we see a lot of synergies with the another important political topic in Brussels, and that is around the future of agriculture in Europe, the vision for agriculture, which is actually, for those who've noticed on the previous slides, we expect a publication on that as well in a couple of weeks. Agri-PV can play an incredibly useful role in making sure that we support farmers with the revenue streams beyond just the common agricultural policies, that we give them more revenue stability. We integrate them in the energy transition. They have solar for self-generation to electrify their operations in the farm. So a lot of benefits there. I'm wearing a tie now because I just come from a Berlimo meeting here in Brussels with the cabinet of Commissioner Hansen, which is the Commissioner for Agriculture. So we are getting these meetings with the cabinets of the Agriculture Commissioner because they know agri-PV is important. Yeah, so that's good. And the last point, but not least, we're paying a lot of attention to that now because I think the doors are opening even more than in the last years to really drive that resilient and diversified supply chains. So making sure that there is enough financing for European solar manufacturing through state aids, extensions, through IPCEI, like an important project of common European interest. That's a technical term for priority industrial strategy, to put it that way. Maybe a dedicated solar manufacturing facility. We've been asking for that for a long time. It wasn't easy, but there's new opportunities opening now because there's more political attention to it. There's the competitiveness fund. There's a new EU budget, so we still hope to kind of land that. Will it be for next week? Probably not, but the window is still open there. And then the other side, so not the financing of manufacturing, but actually creating the demands. That is also very important. We need to create demand for resilient and European products. And there we are mostly driving and being part of making sure that the Net Zero Industry Act is implemented swiftly so that you have resilience, non-price criteria in public auctions and in public procurement. And that will be a tremendous demand pool for European solar products that we currently lack. Yeah. And with that, I believe that was a bit of a summary of everything that happened since we last talked at the EMO, since mid-December. And I am going to hand over the word to Saif Islam, who is going to run us through the European PV and storage markets. Saif, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dries, and hi everyone, and special thanks obviously to everyone at Solar Power Europe, not only for your commitment to solar power in Europe, but also for setting up all of these cool events, these cool initiatives, task force, and yeah, it's an honor to be here today, to be speaking in front of such an illustrious crowd. Just very briefly, my name is Saif. I am a senior consultant at EUPD Research, and today we'll have a look at the European PV and storage market. I will not bore you with too much details on EUPD research. Just know that we've been in the market now for 25 years. We've been observing the global PV storage and basically all the energy transition markets. And a lot of the work that Antonio does and that Dries does and their teams, we do here as well. But spoiler alert, our numbers basically align. So that's a very good sign for us, definitely. I have a lot of data, but not a lot of time, so we'll just jump right in. And again, a lot of the market data is what Antonio referred to in his presentation. But just in general market insights, the EU PV capacity reached more than 340 gigawatts by the end of 2024. And from 2020 onwards, even though, yeah, as Michael also mentioned initially, and Antonio, growth was not as big or as accelerated in 24. In general, we had a 23% compound annual growth rate since 2020, which is very cool. Germany boasts around close to 100 gigawatts actually in total installed capacity. So we're based in Germany, so that's definitely a cool sign, the leading market, but still very many strong and established markets. Spain reached around 47 at the end of 2024, Italy 37, but there's also some new and upcoming markets. Personally, I'm really excited for our next presentation on the Bulgarian market. Eastern Europe is going to be really strong as well. We also expect Germany maybe to grow by another 70 gigs in 2025. Just one note, a lot of this, what we have here is still estimates because not all countries have published their final data for 2024. But in case you need an update, just keep in touch with us and we'll be happy to support. Okay, looking at the 6 top markets for PV in 2024, which were Germany, Spain, Italy, France, Poland, and the Netherlands. Contrasting trends. So Germany, we also expect could reach around 17 gigawatts by the end of 2024 when the data is published. Growth, but not as accelerated as we had hoped or expected maybe. Spain's installations declined after peaking in 2023, whereas Italy and France maintained solid growth. Poland saw a sharp drop, unfortunately, after rapid growth throughout 2022 and 2023. And the Netherlands as well showed a moderate drop, but Nold will obviously refer to that later on today. Generally, this is all a signal for maybe targeted strategies in some countries. But of course, a lot of the countries, we spoke about this in the beginning, are currently undergoing policy changes or governmental changes. So yeah, of course, interesting to see how this will develop. The Netherlands have the highest watt per capita share in the EU, 1.573 watts per capita installed. Germany is close behind, and Spain as well in regards to the markets with higher or larger installation numbers. But some other interesting companies with a high wattage per capita are amongst others Denmark, Luxembourg, and Estonia. Belgium as well, Austria too. But of course, there's also some markets with significantly lower wattage per capita. The EU PV installations in 2024 basically reflect a shift from residential to large-scale projects. The residential share dropped from 38 to 34% as compared to 2023, obviously driven by high interest rates, inflation, and basically stabilized electricity prices throughout most of the European countries. The commercial, industrial, and utility segments, I think Antonio also mentioned this, saw some minor increases. This shift, we believe, is mainly fueled by obviously the need to meet climate targets, or economy of scale that reduces costs, and streamlined regulatory and grid processes. These trends obviously underscore the growing focus on scaling renewable energy through larger installations throughout the EU. And yeah, we'll obviously keep a close eye on this and track all of these developments. If we have a look at some general storage installations throughout Europe, again, this is estimates for the whole year of 2024. Some markets have already published their data, but some will experience shows still take a couple of months until they have some final numbers. Germany remains, or has always been, the largest storage market for residential PV storage installations. This slide here reflects the segment up to 20 kilowatt hours. Germany has the lion's share of the storage installations. However, Italy has also been a very strong market and reached something around, well, close to 300,000 residential storage installations in 2024. Then there's already a significant discrepancy to the next markets. The UK has been very strong as well. The Netherlands has picked up. I hope Nord will also refer to that, despite the net metering not phased out yet. Highly interesting market, which obviously the net metering hindered storage installations, but the Netherlands for the last couple of years has been one of the, if not the strongest residential PV market. And there's going to be hundreds of thousands of PV systems that are in need of a retrofitting storage or retrofitted storage installation. As the residential PV system installations declined, as I referred to on the last slide, the electricity prices stabilized, and obviously the concerns over electricity shortages subsided a little bit. The deployment rate of residential EESS systems was reduced too. However, the overall lookout from our side for the European ESS market is still solid. We believe in the storage market, or storage as a technology as well, and we hope and expect to see an increase over the next couple of years for everyone. As a forecast, medium term, Germany and Italy are estimated to remain the most important storage markets in Europe. Generally, the pace of storage installation growth is expected to slow down slightly, but as the markets are slowly shifting to large-scale ESS installations, obviously Italy is forecasted to commission several gigawatt hours of large-scale ESS to the grid by the end over the coming years. We think that the pace of residential PV installations will remain strong in the major European markets. Residential ESS is estimated to slowly but steadily develop. And there's a lot of interesting markets out there. The Czech Republic has been a really cool market to observe in terms of residential storage. Austria as well. Mainly the smaller countries, smaller markets, but that have strong push in terms of renewable energy, PV, but also storage. And generally, and last slide with data generally from our side is the key market intermediaries have always been the PV installers. And this slide here shows that a large share of German, British, and Italian PV installers already carry storage in their portfolio. This is the dark blue columns on these pie charts. And the greenish, I guess it's greenish, column reflects the percentage of installers who want to include storage by the end of the year being 2024. 16% in Germany, as well in the UK, and 9% in Italy. So basically, what I want to say, or what we want to show with this slide, which is taken from our flagship report, a survey of PV installers in the most important European markets, is that storage needs to be installed, which is why the biggest markets are often carried by the installers who have adopted the technology, have brought the technology to their customers, and are installing storage at a high rate because it's also a good business model for them. So we hope that installers throughout other countries will be getting easier access to PV storage, be it on policy terms, pricing terms, or whatever. I do have a slide with drivers and one with barriers. I won't go into the details now because maybe this will also be more interesting for the panel at the end of the presentations. But yeah, just in general, drivers for solar PV in the EU is obviously strong policy support. Again, thank you to Solar Power Europe for your hard work. Financial incentives, energy security, and self-sufficiency. Sector coupling is a really, really interesting topic, combining PV with heat pumps with electric mobility. We also have a lot of cool studies on this. Yeah, and the rising demand from homeowners based on various reasons, and of course the environmental and social impact that solar PV has. All of these we see as drivers, but of course no drivers without barriers. We've already heard a little bit about stock and oversupply issues that we had over the last couple of months, at least in 2024, which caused falling prices. Regulatory and administrative hurdles, also an issue that we need to tackle definitely as a group with the help of Solar Power Europe. Grid integration challenges, Dries also alluded to them. Shortage of skilled workers, not as strong a topic as it was maybe 1 to 2 years ago, but still our surveys also show that installers have a lot of orders that they can't fulfill based on their staff capacity, and of course space and structural limitations. Again, happy to dive into this a little bit more during the panel. As a conclusion, briefly, we have a surge in EU PV capacity. Growth was slightly halted, but we still expect the growth to continue. Then we have regulatory, diverging national trends. Some markets are growing, some are declining. We have a shift towards larger projects, which is of course still very cool. However, the residential sector still shows a lot of potential throughout most of the markets. And per capita leaders and smaller markets have been major players throughout. The EU top 6 markets that I mentioned initially, they install around 45 gigawatts in 2024. And this is 2 of the data sources that I use, the Global Energy Transition Matrix from EU PD Research, a 24/7 online tool where you can get access to currently around 60 markets for PV and 21 European markets for storage, and the PV Installer Monitor, which will be published over the next couple of weeks in its new season. Thank you so much for now. Please feel free to reach out to me in person or my team. Go to our website, follow us on LinkedIn. We're looking forward to supporting you in your business or discussing global and European PV market trends. And thank you very much for your attention. And now I'm more than happy to introduce our next speaker, who is Mariana Janeva, Vice Chair on the Association for Production, Storage and Trading of Electricity from Bulgaria. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Sif, and nice to be here today with Solar Power Europe. Thanks again for the invitation and DOB capability to present solar market insights from Bulgaria. It's indeed quite an interesting market to look at. Maybe just a few words about the association that I represent today. It's a fairly young association, I would say, set up in 2019, but still over the past 5 years, we gathered quite a lot of crowd as members and spread evenly across the different supply chain in the energy transition, I would say, from installers through consultants to companies that do manufacture equipment so much needed for the energy transition that we represent. And the association has a broader profile that focuses on the integrated approach to development of the business climate for renewable energy in Bulgaria and in the region, since Bulgaria is not such a big market. The quite interesting thing about Bulgaria is that it's generally a small market, but still it tends to exhibit quite, I would say, visually the trends that happen worldwide in the development of the solar sector. What you see on this slide is basically 24 years of history of how renewable energy installations happen in Bulgaria. The first peak, very big one for the time in 2012, was motivated by the feed-in tariffs that were introduced widely in the European Union, but it was a very sharp growth followed by retroactive measures that basically killed the market for a few years. But then again, in 2020, it was purely different story. No subsidies, pure economic logic that motivated companies to first start installing self-consumption systems in the CNI sector. And then in 2021, 2022, after the war in Ukraine, the utility scale segment took off really fast, and we managed to build 2-3 gigawatts over the last 3 years. You can see that 2023 and last year in particular, we were a gigawatt market, meaning that more than gigawatt of solar was installed in each of these years, which meant that from 2020 to 2024, the share that solar takes in the generation of the electricity in Bulgaria expanded from just under 4% to close to 14% last year. And this is a nice map that puts Bulgaria on the spot of European-wide solar share of electricity in the load last year. Again, 14% is quite a good jump that we made in the span of 5 years, I believe. This jump was made despite the fact that Bulgaria is not really a very politically stable country over the last couple of years. And we just updated the National Energy and Climate Plan released for consultation finally in January this year. So it's a little bit afterthought of the market growth that exhibited over the last 2-3 years, but still it's a good indication that the target set for the NECP for this year, for 2025, is already surpassed by the currently installed capacity for solar. And by the end of the decade, we expect to add 5 more gigawatts. Spanning the government measures them from 2022 until 2030, sorry. How this looks in terms of prices, because installed capacity always has its effect on wholesale electricity prices. These heat maps basically tell the story from 2022 to last year. You can see 2022 was not different in Bulgaria than any other electricity market in Europe, with high prices thanks to the war in Ukraine. But the effect of solar was visible already in 2023 when the new capacity managed to calm down the prices, so to say. And in 2024, it's already visible, the solar duck effect that we usually get when the solar breaks a certain penetration level in the electricity mix. And we start seeing the typical evening peak of prices that is several times higher than what solar captures in noon hours, which is better illustrated by the next graph, where you can see the solar capture rates for the past 4 years. And the 2022 is the lower line, the purple line that you see. So while at the beginning solar was able to capture even a premium over the wholesale electricity prices thanks to its green credentials, being adding some significant capacity over the last 3 years brings down prices, and solar capture rates currently are around 60 to 70% of the wholesale electricity prices on the day-ahead market. But still, it's quite a good business story, which is leads me to the next step, I would believe, for the market development in Bulgaria, because solar already has a significant share in the electricity generation market, and now it's time for storage to step in and help both solar developers capture better prices on the markets and help also the balancing of the grid, so we don't experience so much the effect of the variable electricity in it. So what you see on this slide is last year Bulgaria held 2 auctions under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. One awarded to 270 million euro to co-located projects, renewable energy plus storage, but in reality it was only solar plus storage, since wind was not able to qualify for the deadline to implement projects by March 2026. So what you see is basically solar plus storage. The tender was divided into two streams, one for smaller projects up to 2 megawatts, and the other was basically everything above 200 kilowatts. And the latter was captured by utility scale projects mostly. The awarded projects were over the target set by the tender itself, so still remains to see which of those will continue the development, since there is a hard milestone that needs to be achieved, ready to build permit by March 30 this year, after which the financing contracts will be signed for all the awarded projects. The second tender was for standalone storage only, 600 million euro to be awarded, up to 50% capex grant, and the expected capacity to be added is 3,000 megawatt hours. The tender was heavily oversubscribed, basically close to 5 times, and 151 projects were received. It's currently in the evaluation stage, so we don't know exactly when the results will be announced, but we expect anytime soon, since the deadline is also March 2026 to implement the project. So time schedule is really tight for these projects to move on. In Bulgaria, the driving force is not so different from what we saw in the previous presentations. It's mainly the solar projects rely basically on corporate power purchase agreements and storage to smooth their production curves and offer better profile to the off-taker. What I would like to invite you and share with you that Upstay is organizing a Resource Southeast event under the Big Resource brand to allow regional buyers and developers to meet and possibly negotiate the best deals forward. The event is, I would say, the largest in our region. It's not only focused on Bulgaria, it gathers companies from Romania and Greece, so very good to get to know the market in particular. And with that, I would like to conclude my brief presentation of Bulgaria. Remain at your disposal if you have further questions after the webinar or within the time that we have at the end for the questions. And it's my pleasure to pass the ball now to Note and see how Holland Solar presents the market in the Netherlands.
Thank you, Mariana. I'm always jealous when looking at the Bulgarian market, especially with regards to storage, because as Saif was saying, there's a lot to be done with regards to ESSS in the Netherlands and the Dutch market. I think Antonio put it very rightly at the beginning of this webinar. It's been quite a stormy season for the Dutch market, and I'm happy to take you through it. So Solar Power Europe, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Nolt Jager. I work as the Head of Policy and Public Affairs for the National Association in the Netherlands for the solar and the storage market. If you're not a member, get on the phone right now because you're missing out. That's all I'm going to say about our association. Let's get to it with regards to the presentation of the Dutch market. Growth rates are declining rapidly, as we also have seen in Saif's as well as Antonio's presentation. And I think this is due to many factors, but I'll split it up in the different market segments in the Dutch sector in the following slides. I was surprised to see that we're practically in the same growth curve as Poland from 4 years ago up till now. So I might have to call my Polish colleagues to see how we're actually magically connected in that sense. But I think as the industry has taken very heavy hits in the last 2 years, we do see some optimism back again, and that results in, I think, something that we see broadly in Europe, that we need to innovate as an industry, as a sector. And I think the prevalence of that knowledge in the Dutch market is very high, because we're simply not doing as well as we could be doing. With regards to the residential segment, that has several causes. I think one of the things that we should not forget for the Dutch market is that 3 million of the 8 million households that we have in this country actually already have solar PV. And if you split that up in terms of those people who rent their housing versus those who actually own a house, we're seeing that approximately 50% of the house owners actually also own a PV installation. So that's a massive number. And there you get to a situation that we simply see that our installers find it very difficult to find new customers, especially in the housing sector that is all about renting. There we see that property owners are less incentivized to choose solar PV simply because they don't see the actual financial benefits as clearly as those who are actually occupying the house with regards to the net metering. And Saif already mentioned the net metering. It's been an absolute roller coaster in the past 1.5 years, where first a phase out was proposed. Our Parliament agreed with the phase out. The Senate declined it last moment. And then we saw an uptake of the market of about 100 and up to 150,000 installations in 3 months, where we were doing maybe 5,000 a month before that during the whole political debate surrounding the net metering scheme, which resulted in a massive peak. And then in May, when the new coalition governments started, they said they would cut net metering straight away without any phase out in 2027, which practically was the last blow to the market. I think, as I've already mentioned, social renting houses lags behind. There is a split incentive there, and we are seeing the first effects of grid congestion on the lower voltage levels as well, simply due to the fact that there is a very clustered penetration of solar PV installed. When you look at neighborhoods with wealthier neighborhoods having much higher degrees of solar PV installations on the same voltage levels, low voltage levels, and thus exacerbating grid congestion. So we are not only seeing that on the middle and the high voltage levels, but also on the low voltage levels. And furthermore, I mean, as an industry in the Netherlands, we've been struggling, I think, very similarly to the rest of Europe with CSR related issues, and the installation quality and safety has received quite some negative attention in the last few years, which is not a great base to work from. At the same time, as I opened, we are seeing some positive developments, especially the focus on the increase on self-consumption. I think that is something we will increasingly see the debate going towards politically as well as socially. And then we are seeing that, I mean, as a country, we're very small, but the population is relatively wealthy. So investments in heat pumps, EVs are much faster done, I think, compared to other European countries, which also allows for bigger and faster steps in terms of self-consumption. Batteries are lagging behind, and that's very much also due to discussions on whether batteries are grid friendly or not, because in several situations, of course, operating in several markets, a battery can turn on the grid, so to say, and worsen the grid congestion. And we're currently making a deal with the grid operators to ensure that this is not done, so that we can move forward in the debate around the usefulness of also home storage. For the C&I, we are seeing a same issue in terms of market saturation, because the large rooftops where there is a lot of a high amount of electricity demand, they are covered. When we look at the new rooftops, for especially in the transport industry, we see that there is a lot of doubts whether the grid connection or the grid can handle the produced solar PV, and therefore we see the market slowing down a bit. I think, moreover, we see that the bigger financial constraints that solar PV is causing, if you have a high degree of solar PV in the total electricity mix that we have in the Netherlands. I mean, we are per capita #1 in Europe, and that means that we have enormous numbers of negative hours, negative prices, and that means that the developers of these installations are very reluctant to invest in feed-in focused projects. We are now working on that with the government on changing the subsidy scheme, the SDE++, because we need to move to a situation where though a certain degree of risk in terms of negative prices is also borne by the government, because at the moment the developers are actually bearing all the risks, and it's slowing down the development rate. And this also brings a danger the goals that the government has set. Finally, we are similarly to France also looking at solar carports. The government is highly likely to come up with a solar mandate for carports, or so to say, for the large carports, and there will be likely a subsidy scheme connected to that, as well, as we're seeing that the business case is not always profitable. Moving towards the utility scale, we see that in these there is a large pipeline of these projects, but at the same time there's been a lot of spatial constraints for these projects, and that's what we call the order of preference for solar parks. The national government has restricted the number or the type of solar parks that can actually be installed on agricultural, as well as on other types of ground which are not connected to any built environment, and that has significantly, well, it's caused a ripple effect towards the provinces who've excluded ground-mounted solar parks in any case, while there's still several exemptions, for example, for agri-PV, as well as projects that are connected behind the meter. We are seeing that several parts of the business case have actually worsened there as well, because the cost for local participation and ecology have increased. And in other times, that would have been something we could handle as an industry, but in combination with the negative prices, that is something that is dragging the market behind. As you've heard, I've set a timer for myself to guard my progress here a bit, so I'm just going to hurry up. At the same time, we are very happy to have a government that has at least kept the goals set for solar PV in 2030 and 2035. And those are very ambitious goals. For those who have paid attention at the beginning of the slide, that requires the total installation degree to be doubled of what we have at the moment. And I think it's still manageable, but we need to really push on. And at the same time, the grid operators have, in the heydays of the Dutch solar industry 2 years ago, said that we would make 76 gigawatts in 2030. I'm pretty sure that we're not going to make that, but it's good to see that the grid operators actually anticipate so much solar. That is a good thing. That was my presentation. Not all good news, but at the same time, I think it's forcing the industry to have a look at new business models. And if you want to discuss those further, please reach out, and have a very good day.
Thanks, Nolt. I think we still have a few minutes for Q&A. So if there are questions, you can ask Nolt and all the other presenters already now. Oops, oh, sorry. Cameras. Not okay. We have a few minutes, so you can ask whatever you want to ask also now. It would be nice if you could use the Q&A window and ask your questions there, and we're happily answering them.
May I ask a question, Michael?
Of course, Saif.
This is actually directed at Noel specifically because of one of the last things he mentioned, but maybe also into the whole round as well. Noel, you were speaking about looking for new business models, and I've been hearing this a lot. Of course, business models will vary from market to market, but maybe not to put you on the spot, but what would maybe be a possible business model that you guys at Holland Solar saw floating around, which might be relevant to your market? And I don't know, maybe someone from Solar Power Europe or Mariana has similar examples also, because for us, the business models at the moment are specifically looking at manufacturers are like what I mentioned in my presentation, like sector coupling, like expanding the portfolio to offer homeowners, but customers generally the whole package. But maybe, Noel, you have another idea?
No, I think Saif, especially for the residential segment, I think that's where we are at the moment. So a lot of the installers and I think the numbers that you provided with 85% of the installers actually having batteries and heat pumps also in their package. That is something similar that we see in the Netherlands. But I think now the focus should be, especially of the government, to focus on the integration of these systems. So in the Netherlands, you can still get a subsidy for a heat pump that is not connected to the internet and therefore cannot be connected to your home energy management system and therefore is simply costing you money. And those are the simple things that we need to make sure that get done very quickly. Furthermore, I think in the coming years, we will see a growth in electricity demand. So I'm sure the prices will pick up again. But I think especially for solar, it's important to get very close to the industrial clusters that we have in the Netherlands, which are not the massive ones. I'm not talking about the Port of Rotterdam, which is one of the biggest industrial sites in the world. They want wind and nuclear, but get to those in the secondary tier cities where there is actually a lot of entrepreneurship going on, and those companies all want to expand, but they can't because there's grid congestion for off-taking off the grid. And I think with direct production behind the meter, we're actually able to make a very good business model there, but it needs to be focused on the customers there. So have a look at the paper making industry or the chemical industry, and tailor your business model to that instead of a general feed into the grid business model that we've had in the past couple of years.
Okay, thanks. Let's, since we're getting close to the end, also another question to Nolt from Juan. So what are you expecting? Are we expecting a residential storage capex rebate in the Netherlands to counter that drop derived from the net metering cancellation?
I think Juan is not the only one who's asked me that in the last couple of years. I think we might expect something similar because the government has an issue with actually making its own climate goals. So they're looking at new ways to get there. At the same time, we really need to figure out how to get the assurance because in the Netherlands, the grid operators are king. And at the moment, they are saying home storage is not the best way to go forward. And as long as they are saying that, there won't be such a rebate. At the same time, we do have a zero VAT on storage, and I think that's a lot better than in many countries. So we shouldn't complain too much at the same time.
Okay. it looks like there are no other questions. In any case, so if anyone has questions, you have all the emails, the contact data from our presenters, and everyone will be happy to answer also questions later. Just from me, as a final, Okay, I just wanted to announce somehow, I cannot, yeah, that's the two things I just wanted to share with you before we close. We have two upcoming events from Solar Power Europe. So one is our Solar Quality Summit, where we in Barcelona, taking place on 18th, 19th of February this month. So where we look into all the discussions on quality, of course, a very important topic as an evergreen, but especially in those times where prices are very low and it's hard to keep up with cost reduction. So even more important to look into quality. On top, we have our Solar Power Summit. That's basically our flagship event taking place 26th, 27th of March in Brussels, where we invite all the industry to meet and also offer an interface with policymakers in Brussels. During the Solar Power Summit, we will actually launch two reports that also maybe address the question of you, Saif. So one question will address flexible solar for buildings, where we also present several case studies with different business models, how to navigate in these times of grid congestion. And we do the same actually also for the power plant segment, where we will look into hybrid solar. So everyone is invited to both of these events. The speakers will be also there at the summit in any case. Yeah, and that leaves me to say thank you and maybe give the ball back to you, the audience, so that you can do whatever you want with it now. Thanks again to everyone, team at Solar Power Europe, the speakers, and you for staying with us for the last 90 minutes. Have a nice afternoon and evening. Ciao, ciao.